Daisy.
And I'm Terry.
And this is the Monday Mindset Podcast,
where we share things of interest to us and hopefully to you.
So let's get started with episode number 245. And this week it's Terry's turn to share something with us. Terry, what do you have?
Well, first, Daisy, I have a cold, so hopefully I will manage that okay during this. I'm on the tail end of it now. So I found a series of episodes, really. It's from the Washington Post here in the US, and they have a set of what they call courses.
Oh, yeah, you've shared from them before. I forget which episode it was now, but fairly recent.
Well, I hope it's not the same one, because then you're going to send me back. So I'm doing the two together, both parts of a course. And this one is about affirmations. I think the affirmations topic is an interesting one because some of us might kind of dismiss them as kind of woo-woo and, I'm not going to do that magic dust kind of thing. And others of us rely on them very heavily and maybe need to think about how we're doing it to be more effective. So I wanted to share what I learned from the two classes in this course. So first of all, the host, her name is Christina Quinn. And then, of course, during these, she has some guests. But in the first part of the course, she just really defines what an affirmation is. It's a statement of positive reflection that highlights a valued aspect of who you are, or at least who you perceive yourself to be. And this is really important when you think about how to use affirmations. So we'll talk more about that as we go. She has the guest in both episodes, really, Natalie Detillo-Ryan, who is a clinical psychologist who uses affirmations a lot with her clients. And she teaches psychology at Harvard Medical School. So she thought she would be a good person to have come in and teach some things about affirmations. I think the important thing from the parts that she shared are that we want to protect our self-image. We do things, we think of things, we say things that go along with, that are congruent with our self-image. And we, like I said, we want to protect it. She said these affirmations could sound declarative, like I'm loving, I am capable, I am wise. They could also be aspirational in what you want to be able to do or how you want to be. And that's going to be important later in this episode. So she has been using affirmations as a psychological tool for a long time in her practice and said that it really emerged from a theory established in the 1980s at Stanford University. Again, that people generally want to see themselves as morally good and competent. And when they feel that these views are threatened, having these affirming thoughts can help us kind of maintain our wherewithal in these situations. I say this often in my work with clients, but in order for affirmations to really work, it has to actually reflect something that's true and that's meaningful to you. Just talking about something positive, some people think affirmations are just positive statements. Just thinking about something positive isn't the same thing as thinking about something that's meaningful to you and has a positive meaning to you. And it must be personal. So the therapist encourages that she has her clients start writing things down about themselves. So you might start with the statements, I am. It might just be stating your roles, like I am a friend, I'm a daughter, I'm a dog mom, stating your roles. It could be your hobbies, the things that you enjoy doing. And she does encourage throughout these episodes that when we do this kind of work, that we not just say them, but that we actually write them down. Because when we write things down by hand, we are accessing several parts of our brain, the motions areas, the motor areas, the affect areas, so it has more impact when your brain has to kind of integrate all of this. So writing this down, doing like a journal entry, she says is really helpful. Some people might put in that list things that they're proud of, things that they've accomplished. But basically, highlighting things that are of value to you, and particularly about you. So she then moves on thinking about what are affirmations, and then she brings in some research from a man named David Cresswell, who is a professor of psychology and neuroscience at Carnegie Mellon University and the director of the school's Health and Human Performance Lab. And what they're studying really is stress management strategies and interventions. And what they find is that people who think about some of these things that are of value to them before heading into a stressful event have lower levels of cortisol than those who do not. So they measure the saliva and urine of these people in these experiments. And so just thinking, I'm a good friend, I know that I'm really insightful, whatever, thinking those thoughts while heading into a stressful event can help lower cortisol. And so they're really looking at how does this affect our stress and overall our health. So pretty big finding that they're trying to get more knowledge about. They then, in 2016, increased the level of this study, and they started doing brain imaging of people where they could take 3D snapshots of the brain and they could see kind of what's happening in relation to parts of the brain. And what they found, they had one group that used self-affirmations and one group that didn't. They had the first group rank 5 personal values: art, religion, science, social issues, politics, in order of importance. So they were highlighting their values. And in the second group, the non-kind of affirmation group, they were asked to rank a list of 5 attributes of a toaster in order of importance that they believed an average college student would rank them. How big of a slice or how big of a bagel you could put in it, how hot, how quick, blah, blah, blah. So in the self-affirming group, you're weighing in on the value of art and religion and politics. And in the non-affirming group, you're thinking about a toaster. So what they found is that the people who were focusing on their values, on these 5 items, activated the reward center in their brain. And you can imagine those who were focusing on a toaster did not. Mm-hmm. By activating the reward center, they're trying to understand, is that what helps lower the stress response? So again, if you're someone who tends to think, affirmations are kind of just woo-woo out there kind of things, it's kind of interesting to see that they can actually trace some mechanisms in the brain and our cortisol levels to see these effects. And he uses an example at some point during the 2 episodes, but he talks about, for example, he loves playing pickleball. And Christina, the host, kind of makes fun of that. Like, that's not really an affirmation. But then in listening, she understands it's an affirmation for him because it's something that he enjoys and values. But it's not just something like, the sky looks really pretty today. It's not something that's just outside of him. It's something that's significant for him.
I guess that shows the real importance of it being personal to you.
Mm-hmm. And some of their studies actually show if they have people just say positive things, again, the sky looks really pretty, I like art, food is good. If they just say positive things, they don't get that same reward portion of the brain activated in the same way, and it doesn't affect the cortisol levels. So again, kind of helping to support, it's not just you should say positive things. They need to be things that are of value to you. And I think that highlights something about you, because remember, kind of going back, the power of affirmations is also that they tie in with your self-concept. They reinforce it and protect that. And that's part of how they hold power.
Yeah, hence why it's important to think about what is really important to you.
Mm-hmm. So in the second part of this course, she moves on a little bit more talking about affirmations and how we can use them. So not just what are they and how do they help us, but how do we make them happen? She talks again to Natalie Detillo-Ryan and talks about the practical steps of making affirmations something that are useful to us and reminding us that, this is about our self-concept. Generally, where do we develop our self-concept from? The majority of it comes from our experiences. And she talks about the idea that as people, we follow a process of the confirmation bias in that we seek information that confirms our beliefs, that reinforces the beliefs that we already hold. Generally, we're not really looking for new beliefs. We're looking for things that support what we already believe. And again, where do we get most of our beliefs about ourselves? Some of it we're told or taught from other people, but a lot of it we gain through our own experiences. She talks about the idea that if I believe that I'm a good friend, I'm going to look for examples that help support that. And using that as part of one of my affirmations could be really important because it is something that's of value to me and it protects my self-concept. Now, for those of us who maybe have a little more shaky sense of self or a little more negative sense of self, we can use affirmations. We can use this confirmation bias to change it as well, not just keep reinforcing the old negative ones, but start to build in some more positive experiences. So then she moves into this concept of kind of how do we make that happen? Again, she's the one that has people make lists, do journal entries to really identify the things. And in this part of the course, they talk about making them I am statements and recognizing that sometimes our I am statements we have a hard time with because we aren't already what we want to be on that certain value. Mm-hmm. Maybe I want to be a better friend. So we make our affirmation where we want to go. But again, kind of tying it all back, it never works to make a self-affirmation that isn't true. Like if you just say, I am the best friend in the world, your brain knows that's not true, doesn't believe it, won't buy it, doesn't help. And just thinking it doesn't make it so. So saying, I want to be a better friend, or I want to be the friend who people trust, something a little more specific. Then what happens, you can't just say it and it will become, you have to then find what are the steps I'm going to take to become that. And so she really ties it back to that this is a prompt for the behaviors, which I think is super important. Just saying an affirmation over and over doesn't work. You have to tie it to behaviors to make it so. One of the reasons I really like this part is I've just been saying this a lot recently in my work. And you and I have talked before about our brain being kind of Teflon to positive things and Velcro to negative. Every time I make a mistake, I think about it and think about it and think about it and remind myself of 400 other mistakes. And every time I do something that's good for me, it slides right away. We've got to start paying more attention to that because if I want to make this affirmation kind of manifest in becoming a better friend or whatever my goal is, I have to give myself credit and reinforce the behaviors so that my brain uses that as the confirmation. Otherwise, it's going to keep going back to the old negative confirmation. Yeah, but remember that time you did this, and remember when you were like this. So we need to highlight our successes, our positive steps forward, so that our brain recognizes that this goal of who we're becoming is happening. We need that confirmation. So I think that's really important in using our affirmations, tying them to behaviors and reinforcing them, giving ourselves that kind of vote of confidence that that was good, that felt good to do that. Let's say if my goal is I want to be someone who takes good care of my body. If I prepare a meal that's all the kind of nutrition that works for me, I need to remind myself afterward, that was good. I'm glad I did that. Those are the foods that work for my body. So next time when I have to make a meal, I have that as confirmation that I am someone who takes care of their body. The other thing that I think is really important, I've been mentioning it along the way, but they did share a couple of quick examples. Just saying something because you want to believe it and you want to almost trick yourself into believing it is not really what affirmations are for. So let's say, for example, I'm going to use a skiing example because it's ski season, but I am an intermediate skier. I can handle the intermediate runs pretty well in good conditions. Once it gets pretty icy, that's not my safe zone. So let's say I want to be a better skier and I want to feel okay. I go to the top of the mountain with my friends and we're going down a double black diamond. That's like the toughest run. For me, just to use an affirmation and say, I'm safe, I'm fine, I'll be fine.
It's not going to end very well.
That's not going to make me safe. And actually, obviously in this example, that's unsafe for me to think that just because I'm saying it, it's okay. So I think she tries to kind of caution us not to get ourselves into difficult situations or get other people into unsafe situations by using affirmations to pretend that it's fine.
Yeah, it reminds me of the whole, I was trying to sort of tie it to which decade it was huge in. I think it feels like an 80s thing to me, the whole fake it till you make it, when it was like at its crescendo peak. It feels like an 80s thing where everyone was sort of, the whole brash and loads of money. I'm thinking of there was a sketch show in the UK with a guy who waved loads of money around, but it was that real, you can do anything, which is kind of good. You can see the positive in it, but also, it doesn't really work. I really like how this seems to follow on very neatly and have a lot of tie-ins to the vision boards episode from last week. It feels like it works in a very similar way, that these affirmations need to be realistic. It's not to say that they shouldn't be something that we're striving for, something that is a bit out of reach. That feels like a good thing for an affirmation, that it should be a bit out of reach. But it's still got to be realistic. There's no point, my affirmation, I want to be a multimillionaire, there's not much point in that. And that it has to be actionable, that you have to think through the steps of how you could actually get there. That seems very similar to last week's episode. And taking it from that got a bit distorted with people just dismissing it as woo-woo and actually grounding it with some studies and some scientific proof that it does make a difference. They've imaged people's brains. There is a difference here, but only when it's done in a certain way. When you were talking about recognizing those small wins, and you said something about votes, and it instantly made me think of that James Clear quote from Atomic Habits, which I've always loved, where he talks about placing votes for the person you want to be, and all these little steps that you do that are along the way to being that person that you want to be, and how it's important to recognize those, because I think it's really easy for a lot of us to just sort of dismiss those, but that's not really nothing. And it actually made me think, well, maybe why don't you, I had a picture of doing that, of having a jar, and every time you did something that was, however tiny a step, might be a big step, but any kind of small step towards this affirmation, towards being the person you want to be, or towards the improvement that you want to make, you actually write it on a piece of paper and put it in the jar and place that vote. By doing that, you won't forget it. you might forget it in the short term. But this whole, because I'm like that, writing it down. It's one of the reasons why I'm old school when I'm writing down ideas and things, or writing shopping lists. Once it's written down, it tends to stick better. And you could use images, going back to the vision board thing. You could really combine it with the whole vision board idea. But why not actually jot those notes down and put them in a jar? And next time you're in one of those moments where you feel like it's not going very well, get that out and read them. Open it up and read all those bits of paper that have gone in there to remind yourself that actually you have placed quite a few votes already.
And I think even if we don't necessarily take the slip out and read the specific example, seeing confirmation, I've done something about this over and over and over. Oh, I guess I am someone who values self-care, because look at this jar of these examples. Again, just ways of reminding our brain, giving that confirmation of our self-concept. I am someone who's doing this thing that I've committed to. And she uses that term a few times, the psychologist in this episode. It's reminding yourself of this commitment that I've made to myself to do more self-care or engage differently with my kids or whatever it is. And when you have confirmation that you're doing it, it's not some pie in the sky, lofty goal. You're moving toward it and you're in it. And I think that can really make a big difference to our sense of confidence for making it happen. And obviously, going back to the first part in the series, reducing our cortisol, activating the reward center in our brain. And actually, I hadn't thought about this, but he talked about having these positive thoughts, what they found, about our own values and what's important to us, actually lights up our reward center in our brain like problematic foods do, like sex, like gambling, like other things that we seek that might get us in trouble. We can use this positively. We can light up this part of our brain without having to go do something even, just to think this stuff.
Yeah. And yeah, you're right. I'm thinking along these lines, this line of the things in a jar image. I can see how that could work and could give you those little hits, that reminder, with the whole thing where they discuss with the vision boards. I know there was sort of that particular time of day when as you're going to sleep and as you wake up, but having a jar with some things in it, like you say, it doesn't have to be a piece of paper with something written on it. It could be scrunched up bits of paper, it could be marbles, it could be pebbles, it could be anything. But if you have that somewhere, where you see it often, as you start to see that jar filling up, better than me, but I get the feeling that, every time, say you had it on the shelf in your kitchen where you make your coffee or something, every time you walk in and you're doing that, you see that jar, you probably get that little hit, that little reminder that you're making the steps in the right direction.
That's right. Again,
going back to that, the images and the visual has a really, really powerful impact on your brain. So maybe it'd be a really good way to tie that in.
It's great that you brought that up, because the psychologist does talk about that in this episode. She says you might need, she calls it a device, some kind of reinforcer, some kind of reminder. And she actually talks about beads in a jar. So you are right on target with how she was talking about it as well.
There you go.
There we go. Very good. So self-affirmations, positive affirmations do make a difference. But I think we need to be mindful of how we use them.
Yeah.
That it's not just, if I think it will happen. If you build it, they will come. But it has to be tied to your values, things that are important to you. And it does need some confirmation to kind of keep it going.
Yeah. I like it. Very good.
Very good.
Excellent. Well, I think I might instate the jam jar idea in my kitchen on my shelf. I can see where I'm going to put it.
Nice.
Just find something to put in it. Pebbles, I think, might work quite well. Okay, so until I see you next time, I hope you have a very wonderful week.
Take good care, everyone.